Hello, vinyl community. Uh, Dosian here, and I'm wanting to go into a different kind of territory tonight with a video. I was kind of inspired first by I did a thread, participated in a thread on movies that made me growing up some months ago, and it was a lot of fun. And since then, I've encountered other YouTubers in the vinyl community that have covered some movie related things and DVD related things. And it's been a huge hobby of mine for a long time, things that are video. So I have a really extensive collection. A lot of it is official. A lot of things that are unofficial that may not be in the best quality that I may wind up sharing some of down the road. Uh, the things that are official, I'll start with, and I'll probably just go through a bin tonight. Quick explanation of what I mean by bin is I'm not going to have like a big plastic tub or anything. I do have boxes of DVDs and Blu-rays that are in clamshells, or you can call them library cases, jewel cases, whatever you like. A lot of my CDs and DVDs, unfortunately, are not in those, and it's because of the way that I've acquired them over the years and a past where I kind of had to hide them from somebody else that had managed to abscond with a lot of my belongings. So at this point, I have a ton of discs that are just in paper sleeves and neatly tucked away, and I'll start with some of those. They've come from that situation. Also, some of them came to me in that state because they were from Redbox, purchased from public libraries, purchased from yard sales, purchased at flea markets. A lot of them were acquired also in the closing days of the video outlets, especially Blockbuster, because I am not embarrassed to admit I did some serious dumpster dives and rescued a lot of wackadoo movies. So I'm very pleased with that kind of stuff, and there's still a lot in the library. So I will go over some of those tonight that are just in those paper sleeves. Also, I do have my music channel that just has some of my personal music, the Dosian channel, and I have one song there. The rest of it is incidental music that I've done from several different film scores. I kind of want to expand and go into music a little bit more, so I don't have the resources or software needed yet, but if nobody minds it or finds it too terrible, just for fun, I'd like to start maybe doing like some karaoke covers or something on the channel down the line. So if you don't like it, click away. If you like it, then by all means, I love having an audience. This should be fun. What I have here is in no particular order. It once was, but it's not anymore. So what I've done is I've grabbed a bin that has some of the horror stuff. Believe me, it's far, far, far from all of it. It's a tiny portion of it off the shelf. And I figured I'd just kind of like a crate digging video, go through it and mention some details on some of the stuff that's cooler in there as I go through. It'll kind of give you an idea of my knowledge on some of this stuff, which is mostly relegated to 80s and before, but I have a lot of modern films too, just because I plug it in, I look at it, I like it, I keep it. Okay, I have not in any way, shape, or form planned this, so I cannot tell you what I'm going to expect from one disc to the next. Okay, this is one of those little pre-packaged things where they sell you 20 to 50 movies in a box set. I've got marked on here because I may have multiple copies of some of the other titles. This is at least 2 titles on a disc, possibly 4. I will only remark if there's one that's a particularly outstanding quality print, and that's the reason I kept the disc. So on this one, that would be Night of the Ghoul, and that's a great British film, Italian-backed, with Ian McCulloch and Peter Cushing. Really not a lot more needs to be said about that. That's pretty powerful stuff there. That's good quality stuff. There we have Tower of Evil. That's another great British film. 1 million years BC. You got to keep a picture like that. I mean, it's a factory pressing. It's It's letterboxed. It's Raquel Welch. Come on, that's just, who cares if there's no dialogue in it? That's just a really cool movie right there. Howling 3, The Marsupials. And this is kind of interesting because it's based on a real species of wolf that is now extinct that was a marsupial. I think they went extinct in the 1920s. Movie was cheesy, but it's one of the better Howling umbrella titles. An umbrella title, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, is where it's not legitimately a sequel. It's just a film that has a similar theme that has paid for license right to use a title, basically. Okay, Sharknado. Everybody knows what Sharknado is, of course. And Blade 2. And this is a kind of obscure early 90s, I think. It's not 80s, I don't think. Comedy, American Vampire. This I thought was pretty cool. I got this actually in a Dollar Tree. It's kind of a Charlie's Angels. I think it's a Thai film. It's not Korean. I think it's from Thailand, and it's very adventurous and funny and fun and full of action. Same with this Yo-Yo Girl Cop. But I think that Yo-Yo Girl Cop is actually, I want to say it was Japanese. I'm not sure. Magnolia released that. Bloody Homecoming. Not a bad prom night kind of knockoff high school slasher at the dance thing. Trick Halloween knockoff, excessive gore, uh, some neat cameos in it, worth seeing. Here we have Devil's Den. This is kind of a cash in or a copycat that sort of went direct to video of From Dusk Till Dawn, and that's Ken Foree. From the original Dawn of the Dead. He's absolutely fantastic, and it's a very entertaining, if kind of small budgeted and not entirely tightly choreographed, little action comedy horror splatter film. This one is part of a series. There were a bunch of these box sets from a company called Pendulum Pictures, and I've only kept a few discs that had things that I really, really thought were treasures on it. In this case, it would be Machine Head, which is kind of the Frankenstein monster story, but this guy kind of falls out if he has the lawnmower motor that's attached to the side of his noggin run out of gas. He kind of requires it as a generator to keep going. It's a pretty interesting shot on video, direct to video project. And here we got another one from the same set. This one, Skeleton Key. It was the winner on it. The guy that did this went on to make a sort of remake slash do-over sequel thing to Plan 9 from Outer Space. All of his stuff takes place in a fictitious city called Nilbog. It has so much attitude that it may as well be a John Waters film. It's really tasteless and funny and over the top. There's not a lot of money involved in the pictures, so they have all kinds of technical errors, so expect that. But he's definitely a very creative person. Speaking of prom night, we have the original Prom Night with Jamie Lee Curtis. And on this one, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, and Hellraiser 4, Bloodline. What have we got here? Frogs. Frogs was a great 70s film. Yes, the frogs are the problem in the swamp, and it's just, I can't explain it. A lot of star power in it. I don't remember if it was an AIP film, but it seems like it had that sort of vibe about it. Here we have Mark of the Devil. This was a German film. This was infamous for being shot on 70 millimeters, so it was like a big budget, epic kind of deal thing. The original title was something like, I don't speak German, Hexenblut aus Gechwalt. For some reason, I remember that, which actually translates and I'm sure I pronounced that really badly. Witches tortured till they bleed, and then the sequel was called Witches Tortured Till They Die. And literally that kind of sums it up. It was about the corruption of the church. It's more like an historic film during the Inquisitions, and people that were innocent being accused of sorcery and witchcraft, basically, so that their estates could be taken, and all the horrible things that were done to them. It's a rough picture, but it is interesting. And we have Twice Told Tales, one of the great sort of Corman Poe era type movies, but I don't think this one was Corman's. It is Vincent Price, and it is a anthology, an omnibus, I think. Well, not an omnibus, but an anthology. Targets, masterpiece. This was probably the last really good film from Karloff, and probably one of his best films. He actually kind of plays himself as a kind of washed up gothic horror movie era actor who is transposed against a world in which we have, unfortunately, tragically, all too common today, a random sniper who's on the loose. And, you know, him having to confront this young man who's just a murderous fiend. And it's just an interesting film because it sort of puts into perspective how we love our clunky old horror pictures that aren't harming anyone, and how, you know, really dangerous and really terrifying the real world is. Eerie Night Midnight Horror Show. I think this is a Spanish production. It may be Italian. It may be a co-production. Sort of a movie about an evil cult. Has some abduction themes and stuff in it. Psycho 2, which was actually a pretty good sequel. Frankenstein, the True Story. This is actually very accurate to some elements of the book. It was, I think, made for television. It's a very, very long picture, probably about 3 hours. It's a really good movie. Sometimes you'll find this on at a low cost somewhere like a Dollar Tree or in a $5 bin. If you ever run across this, don't expect a really over the top shocking kind of film at all, but you can expect a really good script. Van Helsing. It's fun, but this is basically a Marvel movie in a way. Just because it's one giant special effect. All this computer graphics animation stuff going on in it. And it's almost more action-adventure themed with the monster elements in it than it is traditional horror. Ghost Son. It is kind of an obscure, I believe, Lamberto Bava film. It is a remake of sorts of his father's film, sometimes known as Beyond the Door 2. It's pretty twisted. It does replicate using CGI, kind of the effect shot that Mario Bava mastered, where a child appears to become a grown man in one sweeping motion. More recently, there was a movie called The Prodigy that absolutely ripped that shot off and other elements of the story and gave it no credit. I Sell the Dead. This is a really good comedy horror. I actually have a soundtrack LP for that as well. I cannot recommend this movie enough. This is a masterpiece. They put out an anthology of 8 films to die for 1 year through Lionsgate. I think they did it a couple of years as a sort of a festival nationally. And The Abandoned was submitted and wound up being the #1 chosen film. I knew some of the people that were involved with this. Cinematography was by Kareem Hussein, who's done a number of really good films. He worked on We Are Still Here. He worked on Hobo with a Shotgun. The screenplay was by Richard Stanley, who right now is having another round of popularity for having done The Color Out of Space, and it was directed by Nacho Cerda, who was more famous before this for doing sort of a really too disturbing for me necrophilia themed film called Aftermath. But this movie is almost an homage to Mario Bava's non-linear narrative horror films that are very stylish and beautiful, and the films of Lucio Fulci during the period where he was working with Fabrizio De Angelis, the zombie films that he did. A really stunning, artsy, brilliant movie. This is one that's a must-have. Here we have Dario Argento's Deep Red with David Hemmings, music by Goblin. Daria Nicolodi, classic, essential, must-have. One of the first films to really super popularize gialli into the horror scene in the United States. Before this, Bird with a Crystal Plumage got some recognition and was also known as Phantom of Terror. But Deep Red was the one that I think really hit home and found a fan base, as well as popularizing the music of Goblin. The soundtrack to that actually influenced John Carpenter. He said that the Deep Red soundtrack by Goblin was his source of inspiration for Halloween. Here we have Taste the Blood of Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein, two great Hammer films, Golden Age. Halloween H2O, everybody knows what that is. Okay, here we have Chud. If you don't know this movie, you should know this movie. Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. Sounds like it's not going to be something that would be up most people's alley. It's not that horribly gross or shocking. It does have a sense of humor in it. It has a huge cast with John Hurd and Daniel Stern. Actually, John Goodman has a very tiny appearance at the end of it. It's not even a case of a cameo. It's actually a bit part because I think it was one of his first screen appearances. So he has all of maybe 2 or 3 minutes of screen time in the whole thing. Great movie. Very entertaining movie. I do have the soundtrack to this that I've shown in another video on a club exclusive picture disc to the Waxworks label. It's one of my favorite films. It's a really, really fun movie. Yes, George Romero's Creepshow, masterpiece, must have. Stephen King is hilarious in the role of... why am I drawing a blank on the name of the character? Jordy Verrill. Okay, and Cabin Fever, so a little Eli Roth. I mentioned this film the other day, and now I can't think of the guy's name. Document of the Dead. Roy Frumkes. This was actually filmed on the set of the original Dawn of the Dead while it was in production. Frumkes was the zombie that Tom Savini splits his head open with a machete. So he's got a small walk-on in the film, but he made this student film that is really nicely done on the set about the production, which is a great document about the film today, now that it has such legendary status. So this is really a priceless thing to have out there. Frumkes also worked on a movie that I love with Chuck McCann in it called The Projectionist, which is more of I want to say a tragic comedy, because I mean it's about a person who's very lonely and lives in a fantasy world that's inspired by the golden age of silence and of cinema serials, imagining himself to be a movie serial hero. He also worked on an incomplete film that was spliced into Zombie Holocaust to recut it as Dr. Butcher. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. People can go ahead and crucify me for this now. I'm going to go ahead and say it. This is my favorite Halloween film. I don't care that Michael Myers is not in this film. This is my favorite Halloween film in the franchise. Umbrella titled, again, that's what this would be technically. But it has mood, it has atmosphere, it has fun, it's weird, it's got a sci-fi angle to it a little bit. It's just very different from your typical stalk and slash thing. And I think that in so many ways, it's more creative in the script department. I'm not knocking Halloween. I think Carpenter's Halloween is a beautiful looking film. It's a beautiful sounding film, but the script is just it's a body count picture. It's not a lot of depth there. This has more going on in it to me. Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, great omnibus film, has some great cast members. Off the top of my head, I think my favorite thing is in the wraparound story for the omnibus is Debbie Harry. The Blob, and I have this as a soundtrack too. This is not the original, this is a remake, and it is a quality remake. If you've ever seen the original and you liked it, but you've never seen this one, I do recommend this film very much. It's almost verbatim the original with a lot more technology and placed into a modern setting. The cast is great, the cinematography is great, the special effects are absolutely spectacular and a bit disturbing because, I mean, it's dissolving people. Oh, now Charlie wants to step through. Yes, I'm still going. Keep in mind that in this video, you'll see probably less than 5% of my collection of films. John Carpenter's The Thing. Everybody knows what it is. It's incredible. Breeders. I almost can't even talk about this one on YouTube. We'll just say aliens and women in pits filled with... It's loaded with Scream Queens. MGM put out this widescreen version. It's a very tiny budget film. Went direct to video, I think, originally, which makes it surprising that it has such a stellar widescreen presentation on that disc. Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. Now we're getting into literary stuff again. Kind of relieved after that one. This one is a Hammer classic again. Great movies. All Hammer movies have... generally, they have better scripts, they have better dialogue, they have better actors, they have beautiful set design and decor. I've seen Hammer films that have disappointed me as a Hammer film, like Dracula AD 1972, or the one after that, Satanic Rites of Dracula, for example, are a bit of a letdown, but so far as being disappointed in them altogether as a movie, never. They're always entertaining. They're always worth your time. Alien versus Predator. And, okay, crucify me again. I like the Alien versus Predator movies. They're interesting. They're fun. I never was a huge fan of Alien or Predator other than the designs. They just kind of leaned into body count pictures to me again. But as they started going forward and kind of doing this mashup, old school Universal monster versus monster style thing, I found them to at least really be fun and fast paced and energetic. Resident Evil, I'm not sure which one. I got into those more as they progressed. I like the 3D ones. Ice Spiders. This has some wacky special effects in it. That's the main thing I remember, is that it was not a letdown between the special effects and the pacing. This is actually a better movie than one might expect it to be. I'd have to look at it again. It's been a little while since I've watched that one. Dylan Dog. This is a lot of fun. If you like Ghostbusters, if you like Cast a Deadly Spell, you'll appreciate Dylan Dog. It's based on an Italian comic. The same comic kind of inspired Della Morte Della More. And it's just a really, really good movie. I'm not going to go into any detail further than that because I don't want to do any spoilers on it. Just have fun with that. Pick it up. Dr. Phibes movies are the bomb. Vincent Price, some of his finest roles. He has to kind of provide narrative in post-production because his face is supposed to be a mask. It's supposed to be frozen, but just bizarro revenge murder, thriller, comedy mashups. They're just indescribably wonderful little movies. And as typical of Vincent Price, they have that tongue-in-cheek feel where he's a villain that you can't help but kind of enjoy in a way just because of the wit behind it. John Carpenter's first mainstream, I'm not going to say mainstream, but commercially huge film, Assault on Precinct 13. It's since been remade pretty successfully. He did do one movie before this, Dark Star, great sci-fi comedy. But this one almost has that Night of the Living Dead vibe, where everything is claustrophobic. All right, visual masterpiece. We have Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires. Really, really beautiful looking movie. This is late 50s, early 60s, I think. Technicolor, really pretty film. End of the Line. This is a Canadian production. Takes place in the subways. And it's a really good movie, too. I think this did well at Fantasia when it came out. Mars Needs Women. This has been sampled in a hip-hop track and is kind of a funny movie in that it probably inspired somewhat Mars Needs Moms. In this case, I guess they needed Mars needed to make moms. It's more the premise. It's very corny, very tiny budget, very old. Good Against Evil. I don't recall that being very exciting. God told me to. Okay, now we're talking. Larry Cohen film, guy that did It's Alive series and did The Stuff and did Q. So, I mean, you know you've got a winner there. Really strange movie with David Carradine. All right, moving on. Definitely check out God Told Me To. Dreamcatcher, Stephen King. Leech monsters, things chewing people up, jumping out of the toilet in one scene, I think. Dead Heat, Joe Piscopo and Treat Williams as cops versus zombies with Vincent Price and a lot of humor and a lot of action. Not a top of the line film so far as continuity and flow. You can kind of feel the cheapness in it because of the way that the post worked out on it, but it is a remarkably entertaining, very culty, wonderful little movie. Sushi Girl. I'm not giving away the spoilers on this. I got this in the Dollar Tree, and it is trippy. It's definitely Grindhouse in style. Has a huge cast. Tony Todd is in it. Mark Hamill is in it, and his character is pretty disturbing too. I don't want to give away any more than that because it's got some interesting twists. Raising Cain. This film serves as a great 1980s reminder that John Lithgow is not always exclusively funny. He can also be menacing, and we'll leave that one without spoilers as well. Monster Man. I checked this out just a few weeks ago for the first time. It's a monstrous sort of Leatherface type character driving a monster truck and kind of mashing people on purpose. And there's a bit of involvement in the storyline that is very comical. It doesn't sound like it would be, but it is. And it's entertaining and it's got a nice pace. I'm not sure, but I think that this was one of the dumpster dive discs. But if you run across it somewhere in a thrift or something, pick it up. You won't be disappointed. It's entertaining. British sci-fi, Inseminoid, aliens doing what aliens do with a film with that title. Zombie 3. All right, this is started by Lucio Fulci, completed by Claudio Fragrazzo and Bruno Mattei, with some rewrites going on. The big winner in this is basically pacing, that it's tongue-in-cheek, that it's got great music that's kind of poppy throughout, so it's worth having a soundtrack. I have the soundtrack CD. Would like to get the green vinyl album that has the Blue Heart DJ character's narrative strung in between. I think that would be a fun addition to the soundtrack collection. Great movie in its own way. Fulci hated it. Uh, a lot of people hate it. I I see it as a happy accident because bottom line for me, is a movie good? Is it bad? Well, it's very entertaining. And I've done repeat watches on it and I'm still entertained by it. So I'm very happy with the outcome. Even if it wasn't the desired outcome, at least it kind of puts a smile on here and there. All right. I got a couple of these discs where I picked up a bunch of Puppet Master movies together. Some of them are great, some of them not so great. Let's see. Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. We're back into Hammer territory, this time treating the vampire thing, as a life force sucking vampires that turn people into withered elderly shells before they pass just because their life force has been drained. And Captain Kronos is a vampire hunter on horseback, the guy that expects to get all the girls and so forth, a swashbuckler kind of crossover with a sense of humor. Romero's last big budget zombie film, Land of the Dead. I'm sure you've probably seen this if you're into it. If you're into it and you have not seen Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, I mentioned this when I showed a soundtrack recently. Please do. This movie is the only one in between the original Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead that I think really captures the mythos of the George Romero style zombie. And it's genuinely creepy. It is a phonetic shoot, multilingual dub film like Italian films. It's a Spanish director, actually. Has some of the Italian crew that, in fact, some that have worked with Fulci on it. But the original title is No Profanar el Sueños de los Muertos. Really, really, really good movie. And this is Lamberto Bava with lots of great heavy metal from Accept and Saxon and Goblin and Billy Idol, and just it goes on and on and on the list. No plot to get in the way of the action. Just complete mayhem as a movie theater is torn apart from the inside by people who can't escape being pursued by kind of like drooly giggly zombies that infect each other with a scratch. And they start on the screen and then they start to emerge in the audience off screen as the result of a character being infected by a mask that's hanging on a display in the lobby. If you haven't seen it, this one is such a fantastic cult movie. Fatal Frames from Al Festa. He was known originally as being a director of pop music videos and wrote a lot of pop songs in Italy. This is an unusual hybrid, an attempt to make a sort of giallo thriller musical about a up-and-coming pop star that gets caught up in a series of homicides in the streets of Rome. And it has an insurmountable number of cameos. You can sit there and do count on it. A lot of unusual kind of quirky things that happened as a result of budget running out. One of the main character actors in the film, Donald Pleasance, died halfway through the production. And so they had to find a way to kind of exit his character kind of in an emergency. And sort of tragic the way that the production was impacted. There are some strong visual elements and there are some visual elements in it that are not, but it is entertaining and interesting from start to finish. I've seen it with an audience that rolled on the floor laughing. But I actually do admire some elements of it very much. I like the music in it, especially. Tenebrae, Dario Argento, classic, was released domestically originally as Unsane in the United States. In a cut version, this is uncut. We got John Saxon. We've got incredibly gruesome kills for Giallo. We've got great music by Goblin, Dario Nicolodi. This is essential if you appreciate Italian cinema. And if you don't know much about it, then it's an example of a good jumping off point for an example of what they can do with a body count picture as opposed to the sort of humdrum domestic version that kind of burns out a little quickly. Not that I don't check them all out. I do check them all out. We have Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, another Hammer. Burial Ground. This is probably the most notorious Italian zombie movie by Andrea Bianchi. Features a little person who's an adult playing a kid in it for legal reasons when they made the movie. It is very offensive, very crass, very crude, lewd, rude, socially unacceptable. Deals with a lot of sexual scenes that kind of break the pace now and then, but it is kind of jarring and unforgettable and interesting. So check it out. Absolutely, yes, definitely. Hardcore Henry. This is one of those shot on handheld video point of view shot things. The whole movie is a point of view. Hardcore Henry is a person who practices, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, where they jump from rooftop to rooftop and gets caught up in this whole really complicated gangster scenario. Very wild movie. Dragon Wasps. This is the stuff of Sci-Fi Channel. Yes, giant wasps. And not the best special effects for them. The Raven, I haven't looked at this in a little while, but I remember it being very good. That's John Cusack there. Dead Don't Die in Dallas. This is a different sort of zombie movie. This is transvestites versus zombies. So yes, that is not a girl. Uh, it is a very fun, very funny movie. If you're not going to be offended by it, I would say definitely check it out. Sit through it. It also has some poignant material in it that is kind of emotional, and it just gets real now and then, kind of like a George Romero film, where just when you think it's just going to be an off-the-rails, silly little nothing zombie movie, they actually have something kind of important to say. So that's kind of a cool one. I kept that in my collection just because that's actually got some power in the script here and there. It does have some flaws with its production and post-production, however, because it's got like a catering budget. Satanic Panic. I remember this one being really entertaining, but I don't remember a lot about it. It was very slick and professional, and it had a sense of humor, but I don't remember much else. I'll have to look at it again soon. Freaky. This is a Vince Vaughn movie. Very funny. It's basically Freaky Friday type of setup with a cheerleader that gets swapped body-wise with a serial killer. So now she's inside the serial killer's body. The serial killer's inside her body, trying to fool all of her friends. She's trying to prove to her friends, as Vince Vaughn, that she's really herself. So there's a lot of humor in it, a lot of style. Same people that did the Happy Death Day movies were behind this, and it's a very, very funny picture. Critters Attack. This is probably one of the better Critters movies. If you remember the little rolling furballs, they're kind of like a knockoff of Gremlins, and this is a recent sequel. So surprising that it's actually pretty good. Dead Detectives. This is a British film, kind of reminiscent of a little bit of Ghostbusters, a little more of The Frighteners. So expect basically that kind of element, horror, ghost, comedy. It is a very fun picture and will not disappoint. Inmate Zero, tiny budget zombie movie meets prison movie. Death Tunnel, body count picture, basically, but a decent one. Don't Breathe, body count picture, but a better decent one. The premise being that the bodies that are about to pile up are already bad guys because they basically break into a blind man's house and they don't realize that he's a nut job and that he's also like a super duper ex-Marine or something of the sort. And so it turns into a problem for them. Zombie Lake, mentioned this recently. It's always credited to Jean Rollin. I tend to believe that Jess Franco probably had more to do with it, even though he denied it. And I do have the soundtrack album because I have a weird appreciation for it. It's probably technically one of the worst zombie films ever made, and I just love the thing. Pit and the Pendulum, this is Roger Corman era Poe with Vincent Price and Barbara Steele. Not one of the better ones, I don't think, because it's kind of tedious, but it has beautiful cinematography and a beautiful widescreen CinemaScope transfer. So it's well worth having. Color Out of Space, this is Nicolas Cage, the Richard Stanley film mentioned before. Entirely over the top, a little funny, a lot disturbing. Well done on taking a modern angle of H.P. Lovecraft on this one. There is a Karloff version of this story as well out there. I can't remember the title of it off of the top of my head, but I know I've got it here somewhere. Die Monster Die, maybe? I'm not sure. Who Saw Her Die? That's a giallo. The Dead 2, India. There were two of these movies. I wish they had made a third. First one took place in a different area in Africa. And so they tend to go into tribal areas in both of these films quite a bit. And it's basically the zombie outbreak. But it's stunning to me that they've actually managed to capture the Romero intensity of a script with the Fulci intensity of just a sense of absolute decay and terror in the visuals. So these are really, really good movies. VFW, can't remember who all is in this, but there's a lot of famous people in this movie. And it's actually really about that. It's some biker gang or something that picks on the wrong VFW, and old timers gonna fight. Good movie. Trick or Treat. This is one of those bullied kid gets revenge movies. I actually kind of identified with the main character in this when it came out when I was a teenager because I was the headbanger kid that was kind of nerdy and outcast. And in this kid's really, really into this metal artist that has left behind a single acetate recording, a test pressing of an album that is cursed, and he plays it on his turntable, and it kind of becomes like a Ouija record that puts him into communication with his favorite dead star, who then basically shows up as sort of a heavy metal Freddy Krueger in the finale. It's a pretty wild movie. It does have a sense of humor and a lot of nostalgia for headbangers, for looking at some of the album art and stuff that's on the wall. And yes, Gene Simmons and Ozzy are pictured there because they have cameos in it. Main reason for keeping this one, pieces, but there's a superior print available from Grindhouse. I just don't have a copy of that print yet, but I do intend to get one someday. This is a Spanish body count picture, but it's so entertaining because of its campiness and its excessiveness because it's an Italian-Spanish co-production. If you haven't seen it, just keep in mind the poster said pieces. It's about exactly what you think it is and has a picture of a bloody chainsaw. House on the Edge of the Park. This is not exactly a Last House on the Left, but it's got that sort of seediness to it, and David Hess is in it. It's from the director of Cannibal Holocaust. So, very good movie there, very stylized. Creepshow 2, panned by fans when it first came out. I actually liked it. I still like it. I don't see it as being on par with Romero's in stylism, but so far as entertainment value, it definitely is entirely there. The music isn't nearly as good as the Romero film, but the animation is more lengthy and actually serves as a omnibus story wrapping around throughout the picture, which is kind of a fun add-on. Now there is a Creepshow 3. It's in a box right there that is going to be purged, going to a friend somewhere eventually, because it's just so god awful that I can't see myself ever watching it again. I do like the TV series though, by the way. They did a good job with that. Halloween 2, the OG version, Jamie Lee Curtis again. Chain Letter, I think this may have been a remake of one of those Japanese curse movies, kind of like Ju-on or The Ring. It has that sort of vibe about it. But I'm not sure if it's just an American film kind of copycatting the style. I'd have to research it more, but it wasn't bad. Psycho 3 and Psycho 4. 3, yes, 4, not really. Death Proof and Planet Terror, because I don't care who you are. No collection is complete if you don't have the Tarantino-Rodriguez double feature. If you don't know about this, look it up, check it out. If you are familiar with Golden Age Grindhouse films and you haven't sat through these, they're an absolute art house homage to all of the ticks and flaws and things that made these films, wonderful in some way or another. And it was one of the best 3-hour experiences in a cinema I've ever had. So shout out to my friend Frank Wales for that, because he and his wife Jackie showed up to meet me for a screening of that, and it was a great evening. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Everybody knows what this is. I actually saw this with my father when he was still alive. It opened in a dollar cinema. That's kind of sad. In a second-run dollar cinema, it opened, and still it has the notorious cult following that it has today. It is a one-of-a-kind and a definite treasure. We have a a budget version of House by the Cemetery. I do have an upgraded version here somewhere. This is the film for the CD that we just did a giveaway on. Great Lucio Fulci film, The Thing in the Basement. Dr. Freudstein is coming for you. Pontypool, interesting exploration of language as a disease. And so it's quite a unique zombie film. Infestation, giant bug movie. I guess sort of American, possibly Canadian, but I think American kaiju, but with bugs. And it's very entertaining. This is one of the dumpster dive discs also, and I've enjoyed it a number of times. This is a dumpster dive disc also. How to Make a Monster, about a game of, or a group of video game creators who accidentally unleash a monster into the reality world from the VR world. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. How can you not love this movie? It's almost like a stage play gone off the rails. Absolutely bizarre. I mean, the poster almost screams Rocky Horror there. It's just so bizarre. Theater of Blood. This is along the lines of the Vincent Price revenge films of Dr. Phibes. In this one, he's a jilted Shakespearean performer who goes to knock off the critics who ruined his career in a various sundry ways that are adapted out of Shakespeare plays. And, of course, it has a sense of humor and a lot of style about it. It's very entertaining. Shutter. This has to absolutely be one of those Japanese redos. This one's a cursed camera. Salem Witch Trials. Actually a made-for-TV miniseries about the Salem Witch Trials. So it's 3.5 to 4 hours long and is not bad. Not bad at all if you kind of want more of the true backstory on those. And I think I got that one in a Dollar Tree. Halloween Kills. I bought this out of Redbox. The Candyman reboot that was Produced by Jordan Peele. I cannot remember the name of the lady that directed it, but she did a fine job. I think it's actually better than the original Candyman films. For one thing, it doesn't do the... Well, I'm not even going to go into tropes, but let's just say that the original suffers from a specific trope that I don't really find approvable. In this, we're going with a different angle that would excuse that and brings that character back because it just makes him one of many. Blood and Black Lace, Mario Bava Giallo, early Giallo thriller with Cameron Mitchell, incredibly visually stylish and kind of has a predecessor to the Freddy Krueger glove in it. Night of the Living Dead 3D. Is it entirely amateurish? No. Does it have an entirely bad cast? No. Is it entirely terrible in so many ways? No. Is it really worthwhile seeing it all, if not for the 3D, because of the other two Night of the Living Deads, being Savini's in 1990 and Romero's original, that were both really good? Can it stack up to those even 1% of the way? No. So I'm not going to call it a turd. I'm just not, because it really technically is not. It's just not special except for the 3D, and it fails on so many other levels to be intriguing. There's more of the Puppet Masters. Blood-Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh. Sad that it seems like they've restored missing footage that was cut out of this at the end of the movie, because I remember seeing the movie for the first time somehow, maybe it was on a cassette, that I could swear it was intact. Very, very funny, sort of, well, it's not a sort of, it's like Blood Diner. It's a remake of Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood Feast. Blood Diner gets a lot of recognition. This one doesn't, possibly because this one wound up being out there in mostly badly censored prints. But this one is actually a very, very funny movie. It has more of a almost Airplane sense of humor about it, a Zucker Brothers style sense of humor. Hell of the Living Dead, Bruno Mattei knocking off the Romero style zombie thing. This cuts in a lot of footage from Mondo films with lack of continuity between those and the real thing. Most people think of it as just absolute garbage. I am really fond of it because it has a great pace. As flawed as it is still kind of entertaining and still strives to be disturbing here and there. The music in it is mostly lifted from pre-existing Goblin tracks that were from Dawn of the Dead and Alien Contamination. City of the Living Dead, aka Gates of Hell. This is one of my favorite films of all time. Lucio Fulci, lack of linear narrative, probably purposeful in part. Really, really stylish and bizarre and extremely disgusting movie at times. And this is a documentary on the films of Dario Argento that was made by the great Michele Soavi, who's brought us Aquarius, aka Stage Fright, and The Sect, and The Church, and Della Morte Dell'Amore. This is a fantastic early documentary by him. Okay, Suck. This is a musical vampire movie about a band rolling across the continent. It's a Canadian production. This is one of the dumpster dive films for sure. One that I was really pleased with. I've sat through a few times. I really love it. Alice Cooper has a cameo in it, and so does Iggy Pop. It's a really, really fun little, almost leaning into Rocky Horror territory kind of repeat viewing fun. Forsaken, pretty decent vampire film that I remember seeing on the big screen the first time when I worked as a projectionist when I was young. Pretty action-packed and nicely paced and has some atmospherics. The Hitcher, this is a remake. Not the Rutger Hauer one, but I do have the Rutger Hauer one here somewhere. Legend of Hell House. This is with Roddy McDowall, very stylish film that was kind of a remake of The Haunting. Not a remake of The Haunting that came out in the 1990s. That was also a remake of The Haunting, which came out originally in the 1960s and featured Richard Johnson from Zombie in it. Shredder, slasher on the ski slopes. So another body count picture. Kind of campy. It's okay. The Signal. This was kind of artsy. It's directed in 3 segments that have 3 different styles. So the first one is really suspenseful and intense and kind of realism based. The second one is almost like a situational comedy play. And the third part of it is very romanticized. So it's interesting to see these 3 different directors working off of each other, taking turns as cinematographer, what the result was and how they told this story of a world that sort of devolves into chaos after a signal is transmitted to cell phones and radios and televisions that basically makes people delusional, paranoid, and insane and psychotically violent. Let's see. Yes, Shadow, Dead Riot. This is tiny budget again. Tony Todd, so there he is on the artwork. This kind of crosses over a women in prison film with a zombie film, and has some nifty cameos by well-recognized zombies from other famous movies as tribute makeups in the end of it. Horror Rises from the Tomb. I have a better version of this somewhere, so I'll check and see what the other movies are on this multi-movie disc. I might wind up purging this one. That is a great Paul Naschy movie, probably my favorite Paul Naschy movie. Paul Naschy is a Spanish actor and director and producer, best known for the role of Waldemar Daninsky, a werewolf that he played in, I think, 15 different films before he passed. Devil's Nightmare, great Spanish-Italian co-production, gothic horror. And what is this on the other end there? Kill Baby Kill, beautiful Mario Bava gothic horror. So that one was a keeper because those prints were not half bad. This one is, we're almost through the bin. I know it's turned into a long video, but I told you it'd be tiny percent. Oh, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 70s remake with Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy. Just essential, must-have movie. I got Halloween 5 as a dumpster dive. Probably one of the not-so-good ones. It's an okay one. Spiral, this is... This is a Saw sequel put together by Chris Rock, and the most entertaining thing about it is watching how capable Chris Rock is of keeping the same frustrated facial expression for an entire movie. It's not awful. I was able to get through it, was entertained by it, but it's definitely not anywhere near being best of the series. It's probably the worst. Yummy, that is a campy zombie film. Witch's Mountain, that's a Spanish film, I think, really good. There's beautiful prints of that out. Revenge of Dr. X, that is sort of a predecessor to the Blood Island series. It has plant monsters in it. Is Philippine production. Eddie Romero's not in this one, I don't think, at all. It's older than that. But it is the same... Oh, no, I mean, Eddie Romero is the director. What am I thinking? John Ashley is not in it. It was before he had a cycle of those films with Eddie Romero, but I think it's an Eddie Romero film. Land of the Minotaur was actually a much better print than a domestic copy that I had. This is a domestic disc, but as a multi-movie disc, this version of Land of the Minotaur is better than the one that I had on a solo disc. It's widescreen. It's a neat little British supernatural film with Donald Pleasance. And Nightmare in Wax. I have the original one sheet for this, an old Cameron Mitchell redo of House of Wax. Banana Splits, the movie, kind of full moon style comedy horror based on the Hanna-Barbera kids show that was done with people in furry suits playing a band. It's kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's or whatever it's called, kind of thing. So you know what to expect from that. It was fun. So I'll watch it again. Oh, and this is the one I was talking about before. The last disc is Mon Mon Monsters. That's a Japanese movie, I believe. Maybe Chinese. I'm not sure. Actually, I think it's Chinese. Come to think of it, really, really cool revenge story of a kid that's been bullied throughout. I mean, showing how he changes throughout, but by the end, you don't have empathy for him anymore because he's participated. You have empathy for the monsters in it, actually. That's what it's really built on. All right, so that is one bin. One bin. And there are more bins. So there are also boxes with discs that are still in library cases. There are some library cases in shelves. So that's still not all of it, even with all of those bins. That's why I was very serious about this, and I have a pretty good CD library as well. Probably about a fourth of the size of the movie library at this point. But there's a lot of stuff among that that's MP3 format that's not official that I got from collectors abroad on really, really, really obscure demos of metal bands and things that uh, I grew up being a tape trader with a lot of the extreme metal scene and everything as it was burgeoning and starting to really happen. So that said, it's just basically this is another territory to go into, I think, with weird spins. If you're interested, sometime I might start breaking down some of the more obscure, more interesting movies I have, and they're not all creature features by any stretch. Um, I've got a lot of different genres of film, and I've got um, entirely different genres in bins that are that size. Uh, I absolutely love things that are in the style of Disney and DreamWorks animation. Anybody that's seen the record collection videos would recognize that. Anybody looking at the discs on the wall behind me there would recognize that Disney discs there. So I consider myself to be kind of a diverse person. You'll find that I have a lot of spaghetti westerns, a lot of Euro spy films, a lot of the old Machiste and Hercules type sword and sandal films, a lot of Hong Kong martial arts films and Hong Kong later fantasy, fairy tale, and comedy style films. Uh, a lot of Japanese kaiju or giant monster films. So, and a lot of oldies, vintage stuff too, like old noir and classic Universal Monsters era things, and all of the very tiny budget things that surrounded the studios, like the Astor Pictures prints and things. I have quite a few silents. I have a lot of concerts that do a limited appearance online. I would grab them and back them up before they disappear because there was just so much neat stuff from festivals to grab out there, and I don't have an opportunity to go to those things. Uh, and I'm kind of crowd shy, so I think this would surprise some people to know, but I think I've been to probably about 20 or 30 gigs in my entire lifetime. And a couple of those were probably my own. So that'll be way more than it for the evening because I really kind of I'm sure if you sat through this entire thing, maybe you listen to it in the background somewhere when you're doing something. I do that with a lot of guys' channels. I like to just hear what they have to say about stuff. So I'll tune in and kind of listen to what it is that they have in their content. And in other situations, I'm going to stop and I'm going to look at it. But I'm not always able to do that. And I have YouTube in the background on something or another much of the time. It's great background noise for me. It's somebody's YouTube channel. If I'm behind on things, I'll catch their latest videos just listening in that way. I know I do that with Prog Hat quite a lot. I did that with I Buy Old Records a lot. I initially started doing that with a few different people, and I still do that with a few people. Like if I miss things that have come from Cosmic Vinyl, I'm definitely going to tune in, even if I only can listen in at some point, but I'm definitely going to tune in. There's a number of people out there whose channels that I really appreciate. And if I start covering movies, I just want to make it clear real quick. I'm not going to try to step on toes of channels from people in that scene that I like. Like, I'm not going to be Mike Bracken, which, if you know his channel, I can't compete with that. Let's get to the gore card and find out. The guy's got so much personality and so much drive, and I just love his channel and everything about what he does. And I'm not even going to begin to try to emulate that other than this random sorry ass impression that I just did. So, uh, that said, I have admiration for all those channels. I just wanted to try to expand this one because my record collection was largely stolen about 10, 12 years ago. So I've only got about a decade of collecting on me to recover it, but a lot of my movies were salvaged in some of the CDs. So to cover more than just vinyl makes it possible for me to create content a little bit more. Also, I'd like to kind of expand into the music territory thing again. Uh, I've done music. I've been in a band. I've done film scores. I love going out and doing karaoke. So again, I may do some karaoke covers and post them online down the road. I just have to find the right technology to do it, because if I do it, I'm not going to feel comfortable or confident in it unless I can make it sound professional. That's just me. So I need to get the gear under me, just some simple software to be able to have it engineered properly as I go, and then I can upload some things and see how that goes as well. So the channel will grow a little bit now, I think, because I'm starting to feel a little bit more confident doing this. So thank you to all of you for making that happen. And that's it. We'll see you real soon.